Hey guys, I just wanted to make a quick video going over some calculator skills for us. It's going to be really important as we move through the year. So hopefully you already have a Ti-84. If you don't, I definitely suggest picking one up. You can get them Amazon, Office Depot, Staples, Best Buy, pretty much anywhere. Definitely worth the investment. Um, in the meantime, if you don't have one, I'll put some links to some different emulators in Classroom for us. That way you can have something besides just Desmos. So looking at this, right now I have this set to kind of the older version of the Ti-84. Whether you get the newest version, the Ti-84 plus color, that's fine. I kind of grew up with the OG one where it was all just black and white, but they're all the same. So let's get into it. So you should see a kind of intimidating amount of buttons, but we're going to learn what they all do throughout the year. So the first thing we want to kind of take a look at is obviously the on button turns it on, right? To turn it off, we'll press second and then off, or the on button again. If you keep in mind, the second button is the same color as all these little words and symbols above each button. So that makes each button perform its secondary function. Okay. For example, if I wanted to change the mode, there's several modes I can be in. Yours should be set like this to where all of the words on the left side are all highlighted. This is kind of the default mode here. To get out of this, to get out of menus, you could press clear. Sometimes that doesn't work though. And if you want to get out of a menu, see this quit up here. Second quit will also take you out of any sort of menus. Okay. A few things that are going to be immediately useful to us are converting things to fractions and decimals and back and forth. So let's suppose I have some number that is, let's do 0.25. Okay. Now we know this should be, 0.25, that's a quarter, that's 1/4, right? Well, if I wanted the calculator to write it as a fraction, where we're going to go is we're going to press math, and we have some choices here. The very first one, frac, converts it to a fraction. So math, enter, enter. Okay, you're going to hear me say that a lot. Math, enter, enter. That's our shortcut to convert anything to a fraction. Okay, we could take a fraction and we could convert it back to a decimal. So let's suppose I had 3/4. If I went to math 2, decimal form, it'll convert that fraction to a decimal for us. Okay, so there's some times where we're going to need to check to see if we can write things as fractions, or we'll have fractions that we want to write to decimals. I could also just type 3/4 and hit enter. That should automatically set it to decimal form. Okay. The next thing I want to kind of talk about is roots. So let's suppose I want to take a square root. So there's a few ways to do that. One way, I can see if I can identify a square root symbol. Oh, there it is. Okay. So it's right next to this button, or it's on this button that says x squared. So for example, if I press this x squared button, it's going to add, a little squared symbol so I can square whatever I want. Well, the opposite of squaring is taking square roots. So if I wanted to take the square root of 25, I would press second, 25. And if you notice, my cursor is underneath the square root symbol. Okay, so it works out. You can, if you want to move things from outside of the square root symbol, suppose I wanted to add 2 square roots, right? By pressing the right arrow, you'll escape from being under that square root symbol. And you can go ahead and you can, do other stuff that doesn't need to be under that radical. Okay, that square root symbol. Suppose I didn't want to take a square root. I wanted to take a cube root. Well, I don't see a cube root button here. So I'm going to go into the math menu. And if we look at math 4, there's our little cube root symbol. So we'll press enter. You could also just press 4. That'll take you to the same place. So let's take the cube root of 8. Oh, that gives us 2. Okay. You could even take 4th, 5th, whatever nth root you want to by going math. So we're going to go math 5. Okay. And it looks like this is already putting a number there for us. We don't want to do that. So if you move your cursor over, instead of deleting the entire entry, you can just press delete instead of clear. Right? So let's suppose we wanted to take the 5th root of some number. So the 5th root of, I don't know, 100. It turns out to be a pretty gross decimal. Right? Let's suppose, I'm going to clear this history. It's getting a little overwhelming here. Let's suppose we wanted to recall something that we already typed. So if you press second enter, it'll bring up whatever the last thing was that you typed. Okay? If you do it again, you can kind of keep going back through your answer history. And it only does it for a set amount, 3 or 4 terms. But you can kind of cycle back through your previous things. So let's suppose you typed out some big, long expression and you messed up a part of it. Well, you could press second enter, bring it back up, and then move your cursor around and change what you need to change. Okay. Obviously clears the whole screen. Let's talk about negatives for a second. So if you press -6, first of all, it thinks that whenever you see ants, that means answer. So the calculator thinks that you want it to take whatever the previous answer was and subtract 6 from it. Well, that's not what we want to do. We want a negative sign, and that's this little symbol between enter and the decimal point. So -6, boom. Okay. Suppose we wanted to square a negative. Now we know that negative times negative is positive, right? So if I were to square -4, I should get a positive number back. -4 times -4 should be +16. But something goes wrong here. The calculator, you might think that the calculator is doing it wrong, but the calculator is reading this correctly. Okay? What the calculator thinks when you press the negative symbol is it thinks you are multiplying whatever you type after it by -1. So if we want to square this negative number correctly, we need to put it in parentheses. Okay? So we have our left and right parentheses up here. We'll put it in parentheses, and then we'll square it, and we get the correct number that we're looking for. Okay, so something to keep in mind is whenever we're squaring negatives, always, always, always put them in parentheses. Okay, or else you'll have some issue. You'll get a negative sign in the wrong place. Okay, so when squaring negatives, they always go in parentheses. Okay, something else to keep in mind. I can type fractions by, if I wanted to type -2/3, for example. We can use the division symbol because fractions are really just division problems, and that'll create a fraction for us. Okay. Now, if you're doing multiple steps with some fractions, I always suggest putting them in parentheses. So let's suppose I wanted to do -2/3, not sixths. Let's go back. We'll replace that with a 3. -2/3 divided by, now let's do times or plus. Let's do plus 5/4. Okay, I'm going to put both fractions in parentheses because visually it helps me stay organized a little bit better, and it ensures that these order of operations, well, they're going to be followed correctly anyway, but it's just a nice way to make sure. Okay, I don't want my answer as a decimal, so I'm going to go math, enter, math frac, and I'm going to convert it to a fraction. Okay, it gives me this 7/12. Okay, some other things that are helpful for us starting off with the calculator are the catalog. So there are a lot of menus, right? There's the math menu, the apps menu, the program, variables. There's a lot of menus, right? And it's easy to get lost when you're looking for something. So let's suppose there's some command that you're looking for and you don't know where to find it. If you go second, catalog, the 0 button, this brings up an alphabetical list of all of the commands that you can have the calculator do. So if you know the name of the command you're looking for, you can scroll through, or you can press one of these buttons. So let's suppose I wanted a command that started with a P. Here's my P up here. And then we can look through and we can find it. Okay, we'll get into things like using the alpha keys. We'll talk about graphing eventually, but I think that's pretty good for now. So another thing to keep in mind, always make sure that your mode is in this standard form with everything on the left highlighted. Okay. Second quit, take us out. All right. So I encourage you, play around with the calculator. You can't hurt it. You can go nuts typing things, changing values and stuff like that. If you get errors, no big deal. Okay. If you feel like you royally screwed up your settings and you want to reset everything, what you can do is you can set things back to the factory default, or not the factory default, but the default settings. So if we go second, plus sign, this mem stands for memory. Okay, memory management. So that's number 2. And oops, that's not it. Second, memory. Oh, here we go, reset. We want to reset, so we'll go down to 7. So even I forget sometimes. And we can reset all RAM or just set it back to the defaults. I like setting it back to defaults. It'll double check, make sure you want to do that. You hit yes, boom, goes back to your default screen. Okay, so even if you screw up everything, you can always reset it. Okay? Thanks for watching.